Hi, welcome. My name is Jill Jonathan, and I'm with Red Wine and Blue. We are a community of women who use digital media and friend-to-friend organizing to change the world one suburb at a time. And one way we do that is through conversation. So today I will be chatting with my co-host Joe Carducci, as in JoJo from Jers, and we will be chatting with Dashka Slater, an incredible author, and we'll be talking about book bans. So I see that. I'm gonna look for Joe once she joins. Thank you for joining. I, I see Joe. I think that's your personal account, Joe, so I'll accept that. Hey, Dashka.
Hi,
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. There's Joe. Okay, I didn't recognize who that was at first, Joe. I was like, who is this person trying to join? I think it's your personal account, not your JoJo from Jers. So I don't know if that matters or not, but I can't hear you. Okay.
I'm gonna log
Okay.
off and
Yeah.
come
Just
back
didn't
as
know if you wanted
under
to
that
do
link.
that or not. But oh my gosh, I'm so excited to talk to you. So we'll carry on when Joe comes back. But I saw your article recently in Mother Jones, and you're talking about authors fighting back.
Yeah.
So could you just tell us a little bit, like what made you decide that you had to speak up like that?
Well, I in the lead of that article, I tell this story about being at a dinner authorizing, honoring authors at my local public library. It's a big fundraiser for them, and they said, Dashka Slater is the author of one of the most banned books in the country, and everybody applauded. And then the waiter brought me a bottle of wine and was like, thanks for, giving them a hell. And I was like, I'm really not giving them hell. I'm receiving hell. And what I actually like, I appreciate the support and that people think it's cool, but the actual impact is not cool. The actual impact is kids don't get to read books that reflect or expand their world, and I don't get to have my books reach the readers that I so desperately am trying to reach. And so I felt like people need to understand that this isn't like a wacky thing that's happening in red states. It's happening in every state, including deep blue California. And we need the people who think this is a terrible idea to step up and show up. And so the piece is sort of this impassioned plea to say, come join this fight because we need you. And we know that when we fight, we win.
Yeah. I love that you describing that piece of being congratulated on your book being banned is like being congratulated for being kicked in the teeth by the neighborhood bully. You know? Thank you.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, really, this is it's a kind of a one-way interaction. Like,
I know, and I know, like we've talked to author Frederick Joseph, and he talks about that a lot too, where people are like, "Oh, you have banned books," like, and he's like, "Yeah, but like I want to sell my books. Like I want them to get in the hands of people. I want people to read them."
yeah, yeah, it's a funny thing, and I guess we have this idea that like it's cool to be underground and to be controversial. And at one point, it was probably true that if your book was banned, the resulting publicity meant that you sold lots of books. But when they're banning literal thousands of books, it doesn't quite have the same result unless it's like a super famous book already, like Mouse, which is a beautiful book, and it's insane that it was banned. But that book, people know it, and it's a very famous author, and so I think that did result in more book sales. But my books are well known, but not necessarily in the world of adults. They're well known among kids and teachers and librarians, and it doesn't really have the same effect for me.
Yeah, and it's something you already called out, but you talk about it in this piece too, is that this is not just happening in red states, this is happening in blue states, and you put New Jersey in your piece, and this happened to a Becky Albertalli book in, a town just one over from me. It wasn't banned, but it was removed from the middle school and put in the high school only in New Jersey, and people don't, and I pay attention, and I didn't know it was happening until it was brought to my attention,
Wow.
because I wouldn't think that was happening in my backyard, but it is.
Yeah, and it's happening in California. I mean, I've had my book challenged in the liberal Bay Area. On the other side of the state, there's a big fight right now to reclaim the school board in Temecula County, where there's been, a very conservative anti-book capture of the school board. And so nowhere is safe. We just beat back a challenge of my book in upstate New York, and I heard from other school districts in upstate New York message me privately to say, we've been quietly fighting for your book, but we're too scared to go public. Which is the other thing, is that a lot of times this is happening. My book is used as curriculum a lot. It's a choice book, a classroom book, and a book that teachers use to have discussions. And so teachers don't want to attract the attention. They don't want to lose their jobs. They don't want to be the person that all this bad stuff, hits, because we know that some of these book banning groups can be pretty ugly. And so they are quietly fighting, and they need reinforcements, but a lot of times the people in their community don't even know that the fighting is happening.
So many things are terrifying, but it's like the fear that's being instilled in teachers and librarians, where they can't even feel like they can do their job, the job that they want to do, because they don't want to lose their job, right? They need their job. Um, it's terrifying, and it's really sad.
It is. And yet, I also hear, particularly from young people, which is my favorite thing, from young people who are engaged in this fight, and they're sort of perfect to be leading this fight, because obviously it affects them more than anybody else, right? They want to be able to read the books that are relevant to them. And so they're leading this fight, but also, even though I'm sure it's terrifying as a young person to go up against a bunch of adults, like nobody can fire them.
Yeah.
So I'm very, very excited when I hear from young people, and they often message me to say, like, I am joining a committee, a curriculum review committee. I am leading a bunch of my peers to the school board, and they are winning these battles. Most recently in Galway, New York, where they tried to remove my book from the curriculum, and students mobilized, and they had about 100 people show up at the school board meeting. The school board meeting, this is interesting, I think, and kind of shows the power of showing up. The school board meeting had deadlocked. And there was one vote, it was 6-6, and there was one member of the Board of Education who was absent when the vote was taken. And so they scheduled for the next week for a revote. And when the revote happened, they had all of these people from the community, students and parents, showed up to say, protect the books. It was my book and another book, which is a book of poems about the immigrant and refugee experience. I mean, super controversial, right? I don't even understand. But anyway, people showed up, and when they got all that public input, it was not a close vote at all. It was overwhelmingly in favor of retaining the books. And so, a little sunshine does a lot of work in this arena. And so, as much as people can be paying attention to what's happening in their communities, as much as people who know about banned books can share that information, it really does just take showing up to beat this stuff back.
I love that. And so often the people who are leading the charge for these bans haven't actually read the book.
Oh,
So
no.
they're just right. And so shedding a little bit of light on what's actually in the book is very empowering, right, for the argument against banning them, because like that's, oh, here's what's actually in it. You know, they're trying to fearmonger with what they've pulled cherry picked out.
Right, right. And, you know, and the kids have read the books, you know, and so they're, you know, they're passionate. The book meant something to them, and they can express better than anybody why that book is important and why they want it as part of their education.
And so I'm just curious, like, do you think things are going to get worse before they get better? Or do you think this is just mobilizing, like you said, especially young people who have such strong voices in this? What are your feelings about where we are right now?
I think we're really at a pivot point, you know, and they have, you know, they got the jump on us, right? They organized faster. They figured out that people weren't paying attention to school board races and to state house races, and they have, you know, packed those chambers. They are, you know, if they haven't already gerrymandered, then they're gerrymandering like crazy. So we have some catching up to do. Like I think school board meetings are one place where it's pretty easy for direct democracy. Like you can't gerrymander a school board race in the same way. And so if people show up to vote, if they run for office, if they show up to speak at those meetings, they have a pretty good chance of being able to affect the outcome. I think it's going to take longer at the state houses because of the gerrymandering and because they have really packed those chambers at this point. And so it's going to take a couple election cycles to be able to start getting candidates who care about democracy and who care about women's rights and care about education and all the things that I know you all have been organizing for.
Yeah, I love the idea. I mean, I love the idea. I hate the idea, but I mean, this notion that they did get a head start, they really did, because I think, like, I can be guilty. I'm definitely guilty of this. I wasn't paying attention. A lot of people weren't paying attention to their school board races or what was going on, and then all of a sudden, it's like, uh-oh, and yeah, now we have some catching up to do. But what we have on our side is the truth, and we have, you know, rational thought and, you know, reasonable thought. And I think overwhelmingly the messages that we're out there, you know, trying to promote are more popular at the end of the day. And yeah, they did get a head start, but I think we have the momentum to catch up and then to overtake them.
Absolutely. You know, it's when you look at polling data, you know, overwhelmingly people support the right to read, that people support a woman's right to choose, people support parents being able to make the decisions about how to raise their own children, including the parents of trans kids. You know, like these are all actual issues that people, you know, it's actually not being debated as hotly as the forces we're fighting with have you believe. And so I think that really so much of everything is showing up. And we learned when Trump was elected, I think, you know, a lot of us had sort of thought, well, you know, democracy, like, you know, it just, you know, I'll show up and, you know, vote every couple of years and that's all I have to do. And we learned, at least I did, that there was a lot more required than just, you know, voting is the bare minimum. And voting all the way down to the bottom of your ballot. But, you know, there's so much more that you can do in terms of helping turn out the vote. I happen to love walking precincts. To me, because I like talking to people, and so it's fun. I don't like making calls as much, but I do it. But, you know, there's so many ways to plug in. And I think we're just, you know, now we're watching that lesson kind of go down the ballot that we thought like, well, you have to pay attention to the national arena. But it's like, and you have to pay attention to what's happening statewide and locally. And, you know, on those obscure boards that you like weren't really paying attention to, it didn't seem like it mattered, you know, who the candidate was. but all of it matters.
100%. And a lot of times those elections down at the bottom of the ballot and the local ones, they're not even being contested. So, we talked to Jess Piper, who's the executive director of Blue Missouri, and that's what she talks about a lot, is we need to make sure that all of these elections, that there's somebody that you can vote for. Like they're people who are going against each other. And so I think that's something I never really thought about. Like I go in the booth and I'm like, oh, it's this person, but I don't know who they are, so I'm just not going to vote. But then it's like, well, why is there only one person on the ballot? Why don't we have, options here?
Yeah. And often, it's like that person has just been running for reelection
Yeah.
for 40 years, like,
Yeah.
with nobody really paying attention. Yeah, I think it's kind of a missing ingredient in our understanding of like what it means to be a citizen in a democracy, that it is like this is a participation game. It's not just a spectator sport.
Yeah, I love that. And I mean, the thing is, I again also took democracy for granted ahead of 2016. And I'm someone, again, who thought I was paying attention. But it's just this thing, you're like, oh, it's always there, it's fine. We're fine. It's babysitting itself. And in the meantime, my daughter, it's a daily practice. It's a participation sport, and it's not one size fits all in terms of what you do in terms of getting involved and making that a daily practice. Some people prefer calling, some people prefer walking and knocking on doors, some people prefer just being part of a community where they can have conversations. But it is really a daily practice, and I think that it's so important to remind people that they have to show up for that too.
Yeah. And also, like, in these small communities where there's a ton of opportunity in small rural communities in particular, because there's, you already know people in your community. Yeah. Like, it's not a matter of talking to strangers, actually. Like, if that's not your thing, I like talking to strangers, but that's me. But, a lot of times it's, even in a city, it's a matter of like organizing your block, talking to people that mobilizing your network, making sure that people actually are voting. It doesn't have to be a scary participation strategy, where you're out, doing something that's really hard that doesn't work with your personality.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what we do at Red, Wine, and Blue. It's relational organizing. We're like, talk to your friends and family because they're the ones that trust you. And like Joe was saying, she didn't know that one of these books was being voted to be taken out in the middle school until somebody told her. And she's like, well, that's not right. So I think it's like opening up that conversation and not being afraid to talk about these things. Because I think, I don't know, at least like how I grew up is we just didn't really talk about certain things. And so even in my 40s, I'm trying to get over that, to be honest.
Yeah, you don't want to have conflict with people. Yeah. And but I do think that we agree much more than we disagree, and as a nation. And so there's I in my new book, Accountable, which maybe we'll talk about later, one of the concepts that I was thinking about a lot is called pluralistic ignorance. And it's the idea is that we often think that other people in the room or in our community don't agree with us, and so we don't say anything. And then other people are also thinking the same thing, and so they don't say anything. And so everybody thinks that the majority opinion is different from what it is, because nobody wanted to be the person to state what they thought was the unpopular opinion. And, it's really, really useful to think about in lots of contexts. Climate change is a big one. Apparently, like, there's a ton of pluralistic ignorance around climate change because, everybody's looking around and saying, gosh, I don't remember it being like this 10 years ago. What is happening? But because the climate change deniers are so loud, that, everybody else who can look out the window and see what is happening, or, smell the smoke, see the fire, feel the storm, whatever it is, but people still feel like, oh, I shouldn't mention climate change because that's kind of a controversial opinion. Except it's not. Everybody knows, everybody agrees, and yet we still have this taboo because the people were really, really loud around denying it.
Yeah, there's so much noise out there and so much intentional disinformation, and particularly as it relates to book banning, but also as it relates to climate change and a lot of the other things that reasonable people actually would align on if they could sift through all the noise more effectively. But like I do want to talk about your book, Accountable, the true story of a racist social media account and the teenagers whose lives it changed. This is a true story. And just tell us about this.
Yeah, so I'll hold up the cover so people can see it. It just came out last week, and like my book, The 57 Bus, it's a true story about teenagers who hurt other teenagers and teenagers who are hurt by other teenagers. In this case, it's a racist social media account on this exact platform that we're using right now. And what happened was a kid at a kind of affluent small town California high school created this meme account that was extremely racist and, among other things, had memes that targeted Black girls at the high school with whom he was friends. The account was a private account. It was had 14 followers, including the creator. And when it was discovered, it caused this massive explosion in the high school, as the girls who were targeted, of course, were extremely betrayed and upset. Other Black girls at the school who weren't on the account, but still, were hurt and upset and terrified by the fact that this was happening with people that they knew. Small town, everybody had grown up together. And so the book follows both the account creator and the followers and the girls who were targeted from the just before the account's discovery through the discovery, the aftermath. All kinds of stuff happens. It's like a very dramatic story. There was a big demonstration that went very poorly at the high school. There was litigation and lawsuits. And anyway, so it follows them over several years as we see the people associated with the account begin to come to terms with the impacts of what they did. And we see the people who were targeted by the account grapple all the aftermath of having been betrayed in this way, and how you recover from something like that happening.
Like, that sounds intense. And what made you decide that you wanted to tell this story?
Well, I had no intention of teenagers and hate being my beat, something that I would spend 10 years on. But my last book is about a crime that was charged as a hate crime involving 2 teenagers. And I was actually signing advance copies of this book when somebody in the signing line said, "Have you heard what's happening in Albany?" And told me about the discovery of this racist account. And I instantly had the same feelings that I had when I heard about the crime on the 57 bus, which was like horror and shock, and how could this be? And, why would somebody do something like that? And then like, well, really, why? Why would somebody do something like that? And so I knew that I wanted to do the same thing as I had done in the 57 bus, which is to follow it from both sides. And as I began to explore and do the first interviews, so much was revealed that seemed like, just as in 57 bus, super interesting and important for young people to know and to understand. Like, why did the kids who created and followed this account, why did they think that was okay? Why did they think it was funny? And so there's a lot about what is happening on the internet, about the origins of edgy memes and desensitization. Anyway, you know what I'm saying. And radicalization, and how some very dark forces on the internet are sending stuff out that reaches young people and impacts the way what young people think is funny and what young people think is acceptable. Research about how microaggressions and, in this case, macroaggressions, like, these were extremely racist means, what the impacts are, and the impacts of being bullied, the impacts of being targeted for your identity. We like to say that sticks and stones won't break your bones, except they will. And so there's, I wanted to bring that to the surface, that there are actual physical impacts of this kind of being targeted in this way. And so always what I'm trying to do with my books is to open up conversations and to get people to talk about things that they might not have thought about before or have an avenue to think about. And in this case, it's social media, it's bullying and racism and the impacts of both. And it's also some stuff that happens in friend groups of boys in particular, that keeps boys from being able to stand up to one another when somebody is doing something that crosses the line, that is unsafe, that is harmful. And so looking at, how do you interrupt that dynamic? What keeps people from standing up who might think of themselves as being good people, not racist, not a bully, and yet, when push comes to shove, aren't doing the speaking up that they kind of always thought they would do.
Oh, does that resonate with me right now? My son is about to turn 14, and he's got, one of those DM groups with his baseball buddies, and yeah, and it is a concern because, this is not a conversation that is easy to have, but it is an important conversation, and there's not a lot of stuff out there for them to take this in that's a vehicle for parents to have the conversation. But also, more importantly, like you talk about accountability, that I know that a lot of these boys sit there behind their screens and they think this, like in your case of the book, they may think it's harmless. It's just, you're just sending this picture out there and that's the one thing, you press a button, it's over. They don't really think about the implications beyond that. And they may not intend to do harm.
Right.
But the fact that they need to be cognizant of the harm that they will be doing is the part of the conversation that needs to happen.
Yeah, and it's really tricky because kids really are sort of figuring out like where the line is, how to be in the world. And there's lots of stuff in boy culture that there's sort of competitive humor, which you really see in those DM groups. The group chat is boys are trying to outdo each other and be funny because there's a lot of social power that comes from being funny. And but that can lead to some pretty bad places. And then it's hard to be the one to say not funny, because that instantly you're like the wet blanket, and there's lots of different things that are going to tell you from your friends, don't say that, I'm not going to use the words that are usually lobbed at you, but various homophobic or misogynistic slurs get sent your way if you're the person who says, I don't think that's funny. So boys find themselves kind of in a box. And then if they get caught and everything comes down on them and everyone's like, what were you thinking? For the love of God, what is wrong with you? And then they feel super attacked because they're like, I was just trying, I don't know, I wasn't really thinking about it. And so, trying to connect those dots for them so that they can find a way to interrupt the interaction before they cause harm.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any surprises that you found as you started doing your research and writing this book?
There were so many. One was that just the prevalence of these kinds of racist, sexist, offensive in all the different ways, transphobic, you name it, anti-Semitic, it's all there. The prevalence of that and how much kids are seeing it online. Like, kids are living an online life that we as adults and parents have no idea about. And so about 3/4 of all young people have encountered hateful content online. They were not seeking it out. About 85% of them were not looking for it, but it came to them. And about 1/4 of all kids have been targeted by online hatred of one kind or another for their identity. And so the statistics are just astounding. How much of it is happening at schools? The Southern Poverty Law Center did a survey where they asked teachers and administrators, if there were incidents of hate at their campus. And in K through 12 schools in the fall of 2018 alone, there were more than 3,200 separate incidents of hate on campus, whether it was graffiti or somebody saying something or a social media account, whatever. So it's just constant. It's a constant barrage. And as adults, who knew? Like, we're just thinking, I live in a very liberal area, and that's where this happened. And so the adults had no idea that there was this kind of other thing happening online.
Yeah, and for our children, like I really am thinking a lot about my son. It's like he really just, I don't think they fully grasp the implications of what they're looking at, what they're consuming, And then if I do push back, they'll be like, oh no, it's just a joke. And it's like, well, we really need to unpack that. We need to have that conversation. Like you need to see that it's not what you think it is. It's much more than that. Yeah, because there's been a trend in this country as of late with boys 14 to 19 years old where they're moving more and more towards conservative, mindsets, and kind of hand in hand with that, sadly, is this sort of acceptance of, or amplification of these ideas, these racist, sexist, xenophobic ideas, and we have to really, really be cognizant of that. That's what's happening out there right now. And I think this is part and parcel to that.
Because, these groups, we talked earlier about, like, they got the jump. Well, this is another arena in which they got the jump. Like, they understood that many boys are attracted to transgressive humor, that, like, that's, like, don't say it, they want to say it. I had a girl write me a letter from after reading the 57 bus saying, like, why do boys always want to touch the electric fence? And but that's like part, there's neurological reasons why adolescents are attracted to that: novelty seeking, risk taking, all of that. But the sinister forces, the white nationalist groups, they understood that boys are attracted to edgy stuff, that they're attracted, some boys are attracted to edgy stuff, they're attracted to transgressive stuff, and they want to be funny. And so they are just spewing out these different transgressive or edgy, we would say offensive, racist, sexist, etc. But they're pumping them out, the memes, and they start out on these far-right channels, and then they make their way into mainstream channels. And if you interact with them, the algorithm will serve you up more of them. And so it's very, very easy to have this kind of indoctrination happen without ever realizing it. You're just joking around with your friends and sharing something that you thought was funny, and you're not really sure, like, is it racist, or is it making fun of racism, or making fun of political correctness? Like, I don't know. I just thought it was funny. Here you go.
Fascinating.
I know.
I love
like, wow.
threads together, because we always talk about how this is sort of one beast, and there are all of these tentacles that come out of it, and they all weave together. This is fascinating. Absolutely fascinating.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. It's yeah. So I'm really hoping that this will be an opportunity to open up those conversations, because young people don't like to be manipulated. They don't like to feel that somebody is trying to control them. And so when we say, like, that's not funny, like, don't do that, that's wrong, that feels like we're trying to control them, right? But but what they need to know is that there's somebody way down the through the pipes of the interwebs who is trying to control them in a different way.
Oh my gosh, that is so true. I'm just like, wow. Oh, so much to think about. So, as we wrap up, so the book is available as of last week, is that right?
Yeah, the
And so
book is available. It just got its 4th starred review.
it's amazing.
Seller just posted in Publishers Weekly that if there was one book he would nominate for a national read, it would be this one. So I'm hoping that the nation takes him up on the offer, because I'm very excited about this book. It was 4 years of reporting, and it's a tragic story, but I think one that is usually described as a page turner. So
Yeah, and one that needs to be told.
yeah,
I mean, it's so timely. Where do you recommend people get your books from? Do you have a particular place you like people to go?
I link to bookshop.org on my site. The site, by the way, is accountablebook.com, accountablebook.com. And, so if you can buy from your local independent, I highly recommend it. Those local bookstores put tons of money into the local economy. They're an incredible engine for local health and well-being. And so if you can support one, I highly recommend it. If you don't have a local bookstore, bookshop.org sends money to local bookstores. And so they're a great alternative.
Yeah. Oh, I love them. Thank you. Joe, do you have any other questions? Sorry, I always have to.
No, just thank you. And I'm going to be reading this because I want to have, more insight when I have conversations with my own son. So I appreciate you for everything.
Yeah, I love that. Start the conversation. Wow, this is incredible. We love talking to you. I'm so glad you're able to join us again. And thank you everybody for watching.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Keep up the good work.
You too.
Yeah, you too. You too. All right. Bye,
Bye-bye.
everybody. Have a good day. Bye.
Bye.